you seen that biopic of Jean-Luc Godard that's out now?
Because I've got to admit, I didn't either. And I'm not alone in having a pretty negative reaction to the idea of it. I mean, Godard himself described it as, and I quote, a stupid idea. Now, granted, given that Hazanavicius' film is at least partially meant to be a satirical film, that shows that it's hit the target. Maybe they even used Godard's quote on the adverts. But it's also because there's something about the idea of biopics that's hard to get excited about these days. I don't think any genre has been as damned by their own success. You can write a biopic about something that you really believe needs to be filmed. You can get an A-list actor or actress to star in it, and yet still there's going to be a lot of people who watch it and think, somebody's looking for another Oscar, aren't they? Maybe one of the reasons why a biopic of Godard specifically doesn't seem to work is because so much of his life went into the art. If you watch all of Jean-Luc Godard's 1960s films back to back, firstly, you're my kind of person. Good work there. Secondly, part of what you're watching is him falling in and out of love with Anna Karenina, then falling in love with Anne Buchemsky. It's all there, really. You might ask who can make a better Godard biopic than Godard. But I think there are some valid things that you can do with biographical films. It's just necessary to note what they are and what they aren't first. A biopic is never a film about someone's entire life. In a previous video I mentioned the life of Emile Zola as one of the earliest Oscar winners. And the life of Emile Zola concentrates mostly on Emile Zola's work clearing the name of Albert Dreyfus, a French military officer who was framed for treason. This isn't a flaw of the film, I want to make that clear. Any halfway competent screenwriter, when given a biography of Emile Zola, would zero in on the Dreyfus affair as being the most exciting and film-worthy thing that he did. I mean, what's the alternative? Just a film of him sat at a desk writing Germinal for 2 hours. But it also is an attitude that carries forward some modern biopics. Lincoln by Steven Spielberg is not a film of the entirety of Abraham Lincoln's life. It's a film about the passing of the 13th Amendment. Again, Spielberg and his screenwriter Tony Kushner made the pretty sensible decision that the thing most people remember Lincoln for, the reason why he's held up as a great president, is because he ended slavery, so let's make a film about that. So why is it called Lincoln? Well, probably because a film called The 13th Amendment would be a bit baffling to cinema goers. Lincoln at least foregrounds the film's most marketable asset. You are paying for a ticket to watch Daniel Day-Lewis, one of the greatest actors who ever lived, play one of the most recognisable figures in all of history. By contrast, I'd say James Franco's film The Disaster Artist probably gets more of Tommy Wiseau's life into it than Lincoln gets of Abraham Lincoln's life. But a film called Wiseau, the Tommy Wiseau story, would probably sell fewer tickets. So is that all it is? Just a marketing hook, just a way to get people through the door? Is it really a genre beyond that? Well, maybe. You can see certain subgenres of biopic have their own cliches and tropes, so much so that a whole parody movie, Walk Hard, the Judy Cox story, was designed to lampoon the scenes which come up in every single rock star biopic. Of course, logically, no two biopics should be the same, as no two lives are the same, but once you start hammering them into a 3-act structure, you're going to be hitting a lot of the same kind of beats. The other solution is to make what is called in literature a roman à clef. That's French for novel of a key. The idea of a roman à clef is that you're meant to identify it with a real-life character, but it's not literally a biography of them. It's allowed to use fiction to get at something of the truth of that person. Two of America's hottest 21st century directors are very fond of the roman à clef. Wes Anderson used elements of the life of Jacques Cousteau in his film The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. Paul Thomas Anderson has made Romana Clef films about everyone from John Holmes to L. Ron Hubbard. So what does this form offer that a straight biopic doesn't? Well, in the case of The Master, the film Paul Thomas Anderson made inspired by the birth of Scientology, it offers the opportunity to not be sued.
We must respond with our deadliest weapon.
The lawyers.
I enjoy Romana Clefs. For a film genre that you can't really describe without turning to a literary term with novel in the title, they have a surprisingly good cinematic pedigree. After all, William Randolph Hearst was one of the most powerful and fascinating men of the early 20th century, but no one will ever make a biopic out of him because it won't be as good as Citizen Kane. But let's say, for commercial reasons, you have to stick to the facts. Let's say you're handed the assignment of making a biopic of someone who is so famous, like Winston Churchill, say, or Martin Luther King, that a fictionalised version of it just won't sell tickets. What do you do? Well, even here, a bit of judicious fictionalisation can solve a lot of problems. I mentioned Winston Churchill and Martin Luther King because they've both been the subject of recent films that seem to me to illustrate the problems and the promise of the biopic form. In Joe Wright's Darkest Hour, you have a very good performance from Gary Oldman as Winston Churchill, and you also have a third act which builds towards his "we shall fight them on the beaches" speech. Nothing wrong with that, you think? I mean, it's a great piece of oratory. It's one of the most famous speeches in British political history. People would think it was slightly strange if you made a film about Winston Churchill in the run-up to the Dunkirk evacuation and didn't use that speech. But I liked it more at the end of Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk, when you hear it being hesitantly, quizzically read out by an anonymous young soldier on a train. Giving it to Churchill almost feels too easy. It's like it's saying, OK, here's the speech you came for. Here's Freebird at the Lynyrd Skynyrd concert. You all know this off by heart. Sit back and enjoy it. You don't really engage yourself with what the speech means or how it relates to Churchill's personal outlook, because it's the "we shall fight them on the beaches" speech, you know it. And it undoes, I think, a lot of the effort that the film puts into getting under Churchill's skin and exploring what sort of person he was. In Ava DuVernay's film Selma, she faced a problem which would ordinarily have derailed any biopic.
The rights to those speeches are intellectual property of the estate, and those are already assigned to another filmmaker. We didn't have the money to pursue them. They belonged to someone else, so we had to.
Steven Spielberg, right?
Steven Spielberg, as I understand.
She had to make a Martin Luther King film where no one at any point can say the words "I have a dream." That should have ruined the whole endeavour. Instead, what DuVernay did was write pastiches Martin Luther King speeches that expressed his ideas, speeches that sounded like something he would say, but were, for legal reasons, distinct from what he actually did say. And that is quite an entertaining challenge. DuVernay said afterwards that she called her mother and said that she'd finally managed to put that English degree to some work. But it also had an interesting effect on how the film was received. There's this annual ritual where the Academy, worried that people might respect their decision-making process slightly too much, allows anonymous Academy members to give interviews to the press. In the year Selma came out, there was a lot of questions asked about why this film, which seems so made for Oscar appreciation, went away with so few nominations. And one of the anonymous Academy voters said he just felt like it was a rabble-rousing film. He felt like DuVernay had made the Black Lives Matter version of Martin Luther King's life, going against King's famous ideology that black lives don't matter, I guess. But it was a surprisingly common reaction. A number of people seem to think that Selma, a film about a political issue that should have been put to bed half a century ago, was somehow angry, divisive, was somehow hijacking Martin Luther King's message to make it into some modern controversial thing. In fact, the reason why people felt this was because Duvernay had to paraphrase his words. They weren't allowed the pleasure that the audience for Darkest Hour were of sitting back and thinking, here's the speech we all know, something or other about a dream, don't have to think too hard about it, just listen to the language, it's the greatest hits. They had to listen to a film that made them actually think about the meaning and the ideology of what Martin Luther King meant, which even today is not a comfortable thing for everyone. So in the context of a film which, on the surface, is an Oscar season biopic about a very, very famous American, Selma does actually do something that I think is substantially more interesting. And it gives a lesson to other biopic makers. The truth is nice. The truth will get you respect. But the truth doesn't always make people think.